Well, my first sound design, when I got that gig, I did not know what a sound designer was.
Yeah.
So I just composed. And I gave all this music to like the resident sound designer. I was a kid, I was maybe early 20s. I really did not know what I was doing, but I was passionate about whatever I was doing. And I think that was recognized in theater. I want to leave something for somebody else to see and be able to pick up. Thus the reason I made that kind of hard turn into theater, because that's the legacy I was interested in leaving for people.
Hello, my name is Darius DeHaas, and I am a proud founding member of Black Theater United. Welcome to Before the Curtain Rises, the Designers Series. It is important to us as we continue to uplift Black lives that we are really articulating the pipelines that are available in every field in our industry. This initiative will show you all the opportunities in the design field. Let's please welcome sound designer, composer, musician extraordinaire, Mr. Justin Ellington.
Wow, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here, Justin. I was talking with you outside about our family connection. We'll get our family connection there. You know my cousin Sate out of Toronto.
Amazing artist.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I had the pleasure of meeting you after BTU's gala last year, officially. So it was nice to lay eyes on you.
Small world.
Absolutely. It is a small world. And as we kept talking outside, I was like, that's our thing. Okay. So I would like to know, where are you from originally?
Born in DC, raised just outside of Atlanta in College Park. Got a shout out College Park.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. That's home. I traveled a lot. My dad worked for Eastern Airlines.
Oh, okay.
So where I'm from is where I'm from, but I've definitely just kind of experienced the country because of that free travel.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were your initial interests in the arts?
I don't know if I actually had. It's interesting. My grandmother had an organ in her house, and it was like the toy that I was allowed to play with.
Okay.
Full-on Hammond B3, if I'm not mistaken, in the house.
Wow.
And I would climb on this thing and make noise, and just started to get fascinated with that. And then at some point, one Christmas, a little tiny keyboard showed up, and you could play along with the songs. I remember Ode to Joy was the first song. I would play along with that. And I think it kind of just turned into, me connecting emotion to this group of notes.
Okay.
Or if I play loud, it feels a particular way. So I don't know if I was necessarily engaged in the arts, but that's where the artist started to come alive.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And did you take lessons leading out of that, or?
Eventually I took lessons. I was kind of a rebel. I was like, I don't want to play anybody else's music. I just want to play with this toy,
Yeah.
But I remember in either the 8th or the 9th grade, there was a girl, and she played the piano. I think she played Wind Beneath My Wings or something, something like that. And she just had so much command of the piano. I was like, whoa. Because, I'd play, I wouldn't repeat anything. I was just like, oh, this feels good. What did I just do? But she had real command of the piano. And through her, I got introduced to a piano teacher that actually lived in my subdivision. Archie Black, great man, rest in peace. But he allowed me to just play. He had things he wanted me to learn, So for example, early days I showed up and he was like, all right, we're going to work through this book. It was like a Thompson Red book. All piano players know this elementary book, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm playing and I'm not really practicing, and it's getting frustrating. And a good friend of mine, Scott Patterson, amazing musician as well, plays a lot with Camille A. Brown, has written stuff with her, so they connect. He was a beast in 9th grade.
Wow.
And he would play this Scott Joplin, and I remember looking over his shoulder one day, and I kind of like, all right. And I figured out how to play Maple Leaf Rag.
Oh,
okay. This like real complicated thing.
And yeah.
I came in, and my piano teacher was like, Justin, you're not practicing, and da-da-da. I was like, well, can I learn this? And I started doing this crazy music, and he was like, oh, okay, I need to rethink how I work with you.
Yeah.
And that really, really fostered me as an artist and an individual versus like, oh, you're just going to play Bach. You're going to play Beethoven.
Yeah.
Full respect for them, but I was more of a creative than I don't know, recycler. I'm losing the word right now, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and good on that teacher for being able to see how you needed to be led into practice or your creativity in order for you to thrive.
Absolutely.
In it, because that's very important. So did that lead into, I want to lean into your music making side before we get into sound design. Did that lead into you wanting to write more of your own compositions?
Things just kind of happened. Like I was happy. I was fine. I didn't necessarily think about what I wanted to do with it. I just enjoyed playing the piano and being able to make noise and not get in trouble for making this noise, and people appreciated it. So I hadn't thought beyond the day, you know. But what started to happen, people recognize that you play piano, and they're like, hey, can you do this thing? You want to try this thing? So forth and so on. And I had an issue with saying yes. And so I would just say yes all the time. And through those experiences, I just learned multiple arenas to apply this music that I was making, or this talent that I was starting to develop.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So how did you parlay that into sound design?
Well, my first sound design, when I got that gig, I did not know what a sound designer was.
Yeah.
So I just composed. And I gave all this music to like the resident sound designer. I was a kid, I was maybe early 20s. I really did not know what I was doing, but I was passionate about whatever I was doing. And I think that was recognized in theater.
Absolutely.
There was some storytelling already in my music and playing and work, because that's all it was rooted in, since it wasn't necessarily technique or the history of classical music or anything like that. It was a lot of jazz influence for me. So jazz, I think, for me, sounds like a lot of the emotions that were present in our community. It's a lot of dissonance, and there's beauty that comes out of that dissonance. So recognizing that, I think, helped me be a good storyteller. And I knew I was being asked to either be a musical director, which I was like, all right, I'll try it. Sound designer, which I thought was just providing sound, music to accompany a show, be it underscoring, transition. I didn't think of it as separate from a composer. I didn't even know that like there was a person that was making thunder and rain and crickets and all these things to kind of, create this sonic world. So my early years, I didn't really parlay it into sound design. I was just taken care of by some really, really good people that saw this kid that wanted to do something and had the tools in his bag to do something. I just didn't know what to build with these tools.
Yeah.
So out of that, I have to credit Darren West, great sound designer. He was my first sound designer in New York. I worked on a show many years ago as a composer, and I was like, oh, that's what a sound designer is. And just understanding his position in the room and how he was working and collaborating. I didn't necessarily take his style, but I understood the role and the position through what he was doing. And he was taking care of me as a composer. So I was like, oh, okay, this is what that is. Kent Gash hired me to do Top Dog Underdog.
Okay.
A long time ago. He's one of those people that saw, he was like, I don't know if this kid knows what he's doing, but he has the things to make it happen eventually. So he hired me to do the show. It started at the Alliance Theater, it went to Trinity Rep, and it went to New Repertory Theater. So immediately I had 3 regional productions as a sound designer, not at all knowing what a sound designer was still. And it's interesting in this business, you know, reputation and trust is so important.
Absolutely.
And that built reputation and trust a little bit, though it wasn't real. I mean, it was real, but I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest with you. You know, I was taken care of. But every job, every production, it's just like, okay, I want to learn.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the weak link.
Yeah.
I want to be ahead of this. Oh, okay, these were problems in the last thing. Let me get ahead of that. And so it's just been like Masterclass for, I don't know, since 1997.
As he said, very, very. It's like, no, your secret is safe with me. That's right. Well, but what I'm also hearing throughout this journey at this point with you is your openness. And I think that is one of the key things to survival in this industry and to be able to thrive in this industry. I came up in a time where it's like, okay, well, what is it you do? Okay, well, you do that one thing, or you do that one thing, you do that one thing. And I always kind of took joy in being a multidisciplinarian. And what I'm hearing from you also is that, well, you happened into these things and you enjoyed it and you were just trying to find a way to, if you could make noise and not disturb anybody, but now it went to another level and then it went to another level. And people saw something in that and said, well, I see the potential in this. And I think, particularly in this day and age, that is so important in terms of being able to show young people, and particularly young Black people, that the possibilities are numerous and wide. And if you can find that sense of play and you know, you never know who you're going to connect with.
That's right.
Whether it's a Darren West or Archie Black or and who could see that potential, Kent Gash, who saw that potential, say, oh, I don't know what that kid can do, but let's do this. So you were in Atlanta, you worked at the Alliance Theater with our friend Kent Gash, and I did a show there called Jesus Christ Superstar Gospel, which you said you saw. Yay!
I did. It's fantastic.
Yay, thank you. Did you do a lot of shows at the Alliance?
I did actually. I have to actually credit the Freddie Hendrix Youth Ensemble of Atlanta before I even got to the Alliance.
Oh, okay.
The Alliance saw me there, working with this youth theater group that produced Saquon Singla, Sa and Gauja. Jakina is kind of connected to that.
Sure.
We all went to the same high school.
Oh yeah,
which is crazy.
Oh man. Yeah.
So out of that, either Kent or Rosemary Newcott, who was head of the Young Theater for Young Audiences, saw me in my musical directing role with this Freddie Hendrix Youth Ensemble of Atlanta. And one of them was like, hey, we'd love for you to do a show over here, right? So this was my entrance into actually professional theater, you know. Freddie Hendrix, we were professionals. You'd be blown away if you saw this company. It was amazing.
I'm sure.
But to step into this regional theater was just a different space. You know, you felt like, oh, this is the industry now. I feel the industry and how the industry is supported or not supported sometimes. And out of that, I did a couple Theater for Young Audiences shows. And then Kent and I did Jitney, Top Dog, King Headley. Maybe I didn't do Jitney with him. Shakespeare's R&J. So I got a few in at the Alliance. Never on the main stage. I don't think I made it to the main stage. I left, came here, started working, and then of course they're like, hey, that's how it goes.
Well, ain't that always the way? It's like, okay, well, I moved. You know, it's too late. Well, I was going to ask you, I said, so how did you make your way to New York? So what was it that brought you to New York?
Kent Gash, a long time ago, he was like, you need to go to New York. And I was like, okay, I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know why. again, this small world thing. So Sa Gouger was working and developing this piece called The Seven, right, with Will Power, when the Hip Hop Theater Festival was really happening. So I was he was actually helping develop, and when it came down for production, he wasn't in it. But sidebar, that he got Fela out of that because Bill T choreographed The Seven. So they were looking for a composer that was kind of experienced in theater and in the music industry, just for the sonic quality of the material. So I was like, oh, you need to call my brother Justin. He's in Atlanta. Will and I connected on the phone, started talking. So we made we agreed to work together. I had this production. Out of that, he wrote Fetch Clay Make Man. Des McAnuff, who directed that, I know this is like a crazy story, but Des McAnuff, who directed that, said, hey, who's that guy you worked with on The Seven? He should do this. So I ended up coming in to do that. That was at the McCarter, right? So now I have this affiliation at Princeton because of the McCarter.
Right.
It's like, cool. In the midst of that, one chunk that's kind of missing is I was really involved in the music industry, like a lot of hip hop, R&B, and all that, like in it. So in the midst of this, my father got his bone marrow cancer, right? This was before moving to New York, and he likes to brag on his son. He's just proud of his son. And I had worked on a couple things that I was like, oh, I don't want you telling your friends this particular title, because it just sounds like, who's proud of this title? I was proud of the checks. I was proud of the working environment. But, when you're writing music, you write it and then you give it. When you're producing, you make the music, give it to writers, and who knows what they'll end up writing on it.
Right.
And then the A&R is like, that's a hit. So things like that were happening. I was like, my dad has this cancer. It's this rare cancer. We don't know how long he'll be with us. I want to give him something different to talk about other than these rap songs I've been working on. You know what I mean? So out of that, I just felt like the universe started to kind of conspire. Because of that Princeton connection. I was asked to do the Toni Morrison's Atelier program there, which was a month. And it was a big chunk of money, probably more than I had ever seen. Because I was like, I'll do this for free. I was that artist. Don't be that artist. And I got this money, which allowed me, and I was like, I'm going to move to New York because I want to give my dad something different to talk about. So once I kind of put that in the air, I got these opportunities, and I just kind of been here ever since. I couldn't, without that McCarter thing, I would not have been able to just like get a place and do all the things, but that afforded that. And it's just been kind of, I've been saying yes ever since,
What strikes me so beautifully, and when you talked about your father and said, well, I want to have something that I feel that my father would be proud of in terms of when he talks about what his son does. And that really strikes me in such a deep way, particularly as we get older and we think about our families and how you giving it over to that idea rather than I had the ambition to do all of this and all that. And ambition is not a bad thing at all, but the generosity and openness of that. And again, how I see all this, you just come into the sandbox to play.
Absolutely.
And being open and collaborating with all these different artists, such a diverse array of artists, which makes me want to pivot into, because you have been working so much in the music industry, and you had touched on that, and I would like for you to elaborate on that, because you had worked with Usher and all these other people. So what was the germination of that, and how was that alongside everything else you were doing?
I mean, it's all, I like to say I only do one, maybe two things. I just apply it in different arenas, right? So it all, for me, comes from being a pianist, playing the piano, and not having learned really how to play it traditionally, right? So out of that, I'm creating new sounds, new techniques, I don't know what's wrong, right? I don't know the wrong thing to do. So I'm like, let's just play this.
Right.
And that works when you're in creative mode,
Absolutely.
right?
That's what Miles Davis said, play them wrong notes.
Absolutely.
That's where you find the beauty.
A friend of mine he was like, hey, and mind you, Atlanta in the 90s, early to mid 90s was starting to boom as just a music spot for hip hop and R&B. You had your Outkast, TLC, LaFace, all these record companies were starting to really set foot there. So
absolutely.
Artists were coming as well. And one of my best friends was like, hey, my cousin's working with Sam Snead. I was like, I know that name. Anyway, Sam Snead was connected to Dr. Dre. So he was a producer, great producer, worked with tons of people, and he had me like replaying albums as opposed to him sampling these albums, right? So I would listen to a song and tweak the keyboard and like replay it so it sounded exactly like that thing. That kind of got me into the world of producing, right? And one day he was like, hey, meet me at the studio. I was like, all right. Went to the studio. He was like, yeah, I just want you to play some keys on this thing. Took me out to the hallway, went in his sock, gave me $500. I was maybe 19 or 20. $500. I played for 15 minutes and I went home. I was like, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I got five. I was like, this is the move, And so that just kind of kept me in the arena and starting to learn the space and how just production works in general. My high school, again, Outkast, Escape, Jagged Edge, people, like it's just the music industry was there. And a really good guy, Chandra Crawford, known as Bangladesh now, was a producer that I was connected with. He did like What's Your Fantasy, Ludacris, like he was really starting to blow up. We had a mutual friend. He was looking for a musician to work with. And we got connected. Played on something. I think the first thing that we collaborated on, it was kind of a hit. It was like a Sierra song or something like that. And we just started just working and creating, and I love that camaraderie. He's one of the most talented producers, period. He may come from left field and I understand where he's coming from, and I'm like, oh, you mean this, and da-da-da-da-da. And then you have this great music, So that really got me into it. Like we were just locked in. And I still, got much love for him and that relationship and how we work together. Yeah, I get like the same joy and the camaraderie in working in a studio. Like we walk into an empty space or a space that's quiet. And when we leave, we put so much sound into that space and we're taking that sound with us. Like that's magical to me with other people. So you get to hear the individuals. And when you think of music, it's a record. This is like just no different from a photograph. This is a record in time. I can listen to it and say the time, the date, the hands that played a part, and history is very important to me, just legacy. I want to leave something for somebody else to see and be able to pick up. Thus the reason I made that kind of hard turn into theater, because that's the legacy I was interested in leaving for people.
So speaking of legacy, coming into theater, coming into the commercial theater, into the Broadway theater, of which you are so prominent and you have worked on so many fantastic shows. Did you ever find it a little isolating? I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but being the only Black sound designer?
No, coming from Atlanta, there's one special thing that Atlanta will do out of many special things, but you don't have to look in the mirror to see yourself, right? Black people, I'm not a fan of the phrase people of color, but we're everywhere. We're doctors, lawyers, teachers, news, every position, so nothing was out of reach, right? Nothing felt like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. It oftentimes, like just the other day, I'm sitting in the theater, I'm like, oh, I'm the only black person in here, like for weeks, in the big room, you know. It takes me a second to recognize that sometimes because I'm not overly conscious or uncomfortable being in any space. I'm just me, you know. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. I totally relate to that feeling. Sometimes it takes someone's like, oh, okay. In being with Black Theater United and the initiatives we've created, our mentorship program, this initiative in which we bring designers into the fold and talk to them about their careers, to expand on the idea, particularly for young people, what the possibilities are in this industry. I think we're extremely fortunate to be able to have had these opportunities and to have people that have recognized our potential and who have been able to help us cultivate where we go and to keep our sense of openness. In your having worked in the industry as long as you have now, do you mentor any young people?
Absolutely.
And if you do, what do you try to convey to them?
I absolutely do. It's kind of my favorite thing to do is to give the gems that I have away. If I like something a lot, I tend to give it away, from a book to music, knowledge, information, all of that. And for me, I'm typically just letting people know what they already have. Like, you already have the things, like you have it. You might not know what to do with it yet, right? You might not be willing to make a mistake or be wrong or fall down, which is necessary, right? In this industry, you have to be able to receive a no and keep going. You have to learn a creative way to get back up if you get knocked down. Sometimes that's our world. So it's usually that. I'm more about empowering, you know, as a kind of a jazz thinker. I can't tell anybody how the melody should go. You know, it's that. But you should learn these scales, learn these chords, so now you can be yourself in it. You know, that's typically what I'm trying to do. And I want to work with people that are excited. You know, I want to let kids know that a producer is no different from a composer. And actually, when you start to make some money or get in the business, you won't be called a producer when it comes to publishing and all that. You'll be a composer or a writer. So understand what that is. Understand the titles apply to arenas that you're working in, right? And they can just shift. An orchestrator is kind of doing what a producer would do, you know? An arranger is not a composer. So just kind of letting people know, if you're calling yourself a producer and you're doing the things of producer, then you're kind of getting close to being an orchestrator. Because you're like, oh, this should be played with this kind of sound. Oh, a flute should do that along with that. Like, it's very similar, right? Delivery of the work is different, and who you answer to and direct things to may be different, but at its core, it's the same thing, you know? So I'm always just trying to do that. Like, what can I simplify what may seem like a complicated world? How can I simplify that for a person so that they can navigate through it and know that they can remove fear as much as possible, right? Change that feeling of fear to just like, I'm really engaged. It's just energy. So let's change the label. It's like we changed the label of producer to orchestrator. Let's change the label that we're giving that energy, fear, to just, I'm really invested. I really care, you know? You might be scared. More reason to dive in, I think, if you have somebody that is supporting you and has a hand right outside ready to grab you if you feel like you're going down, you know? I think that's how I like to mentor. Well,
I think you are absolutely right. And Justin Ellington, you are everything. I think you have just articulated in such a generous and beautiful and in a way that I hope as many young people can hear what you have to say, because it's very inspiring and very real and very accessible, you know, in that way. I'm not even finding the right word to say, but it's what I hope every young person can take in and realize for themselves, because you already have it. It's like it's already there.
It's there.
Yeah.
And we're constantly being told who we are or what we can do before we tell ourselves, before we investigate that for ourselves, right? And when I say told, like there's not some big entity like you're supposed to be a ball player, it's not that, but we mimic what we see. You know, what's available in our world is what we've seen people go into. You know, we don't see a lot of people go into sound design. It kind of sneaks up on you and you're like, oh, that's a job. That's a thing I can actually do. So yeah, I just need to present the thing, right? Know that this is possible. This is actually a job. It's a career that you can really enjoy and have some of the same pleasures as being a producer in the studio and so forth and so on, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we will continue that journey. Thank you, Justin Ellington, for sharing with us the world of sound design.
My pleasure.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website at blacktheaterunited.com. Black Theater United, creating pipelines for you, the future of our industry.